Hello, and welcome to my first video about the basics of Terraform. In this video, I'm going to go over how to create resources with Terraform, how to manage those resources, and how to remove them again at the end. This is really intended for people who have never used Terraform before and possibly not used the cloud before. If that isn't you, if you have used Terraform, this may be a bit basic, but you're welcome to watch, obviously, for a refresher. The first thing you're going to need is an AWS account. I've set this one up. You can set up your own. You'll need to give them a credit card, but there is a free tier. Have a look into that. Or you can use a work account. Maybe just check you've got permission. We're also going to need some software installed, some tooling. That's the AWS command line, which you can install directly from AWS. I will link the instructions. And Terraform. So what you should achieve after installing those two is that you can run AWS, as we can see, and you've got Terraform available as well. Once you've done that, come back here and we'll carry on. Next, I need to create a user to authenticate with AWS. So I'm going to go to IAM, Identity and Access Management, Users, Create User, a username, click Next. Attach policies directly. I'm going to attach the administrator access policy in this case. It's quite a broad policy. It gives you access to everything, but it's okay for now. I'll talk another time perhaps about the principle of least privilege and how you should generally give things the minimum set of resources that they need to do the jobs. Okay, so we'll click Next and create user. Now to use that user from my command line, I need to create security credentials. When I click on this create access key, AWS will give me quite a lot of instructions about not using sort of static access keys because it's effectively a username and password. That's very valid. You can read all about that if you want, but for the time being, let's just create an access key. I don't need to tag it. Create access key. So like I say, this is a username and password. I'll show you how to set them up in your terminal. I'm going to go here and do AWS configure. It's asking for the access key and now the secret access key. Copy that. I have just shown you the secret key that I said is like a password. I'm going to go and remove it after recording this video and before I upload it. So bad luck to the one person who's already trying to use it. And then a default region, EU West 2 is in London, so that's an okay choice for me. US-East-1 is good if you're in the US. It's not too important at this stage, just choose one that makes sense. Okay, now if I do AWS STS get caller identity, we can see that I've authenticated. And I can do AWS S3 LS, and we can see that there's nothing in S3, and if I just go to the console, we can see that is the case. There is no S3 bucket. Now I could click Create Bucket and go through the steps there, but obviously we want to learn to use Terraform to do infrastructure as code, so let's do that. I'm using Visual Studio Code as my IDE, and I have the HashiCorp Terraform extension installed. This just gives us some highlighting, makes it a bit easier, gives us autocomplete. It's quite nice for writing Terraform code, so I'd recommend Visual Studio Code and the Terraform extension. Okay, first thing we're going to need is a Terraform file. Conventionally, we call it main.tf just because it's the first file, it's the main file. Terraform will actually collect any files in a single directory that have the .tf extension. So you can, if you want to, split things once you get up to lots of resources. It makes sense to split them into logical files, but for the time being, we'll stick to the one file so you can see everything at once. Now, first thing we need to do to use S3 is create a bucket. Resource, AWS S3 bucket, and then an ID. And I'll explain what this line means here. So a resource is saying, create this resource for me. Fairly self-explanatory. There are some other values that you might see around creating these blocks. Data source, looking up information from AWS, that sort of thing. Second argument here is the resource type. So the first part before the underscore is AWS. Second part is the service, S3. S3 was actually the very first AWS service that was released to the public back in 2006. So felt like an appropriate one to start with for this set of lessons. And then the resource type itself, so the bucket. This is an internal identifier that Terraform is going to use. So when we are performing operations against this resource using the Terraform command line, or if we are referring back to it from other pieces of Terraform code, that's what this value is used for. Conventionally, if you want multiple words here, we would use underscores rather than dashes, just so that when you're typing it, you don't get mixed up about when do I need underscore, when do I need dash. Let's do a dash there. Sorry, an underscore there. Okay, the very first thing we need to set for our bucket is the name. One of the interesting things about S3 is that bucket names are globally unique. They have to be unique, a bit like a domain name. So someone already owns test-bucket. We can't use that name. But what we can do instead is use the argument bucket underscore prefix. And that is just a helper function from Terraform that will append a timestamp on the end of that value that I've passed in. So it will do test bucket 2025, blah, blah, blah. Just saves us having to come up with our own random name at this point. Obviously, if there is a bucket name that you want specifically, you can set bucket itself and grab that bucket name. You don't have to use bucket prefix. And those 3 lines are the minimum viable Terraform. We can go and apply that. So the first command we're going to run for our Terraform is terraform init for initialize. That will initialize the backend, which I'll talk about in the next video, and then the provider plugins. So it's going to install the HashiCorp AWS plugin. What this is doing is installing the code that Terraform uses to talk to AWS. So it's not underneath, it's not using the AWS command line that we've just installed. You don't need the AWS command line to do stuff with Terraform. It's just useful to be able to use configure and other commands, the s3ls command, for example. But you can see it's initialized, and that's created some files here. We've got Terraform .lock.hcl, HashiCorp configuration language, and that is just a way of checking that you've got the same version of the AWS provider everywhere that you're using this Terraform. And this is the binary for the provider itself, but you don't need to worry about either of these things. Just leave them be. Okay, next command we're going to do is terraform apply. This will go away, look at AWS, look at what we've written in our Terraform here, and say, I need to create a bucket. And you can see that the bucket prefix is set. These are the values we haven't set. You can go and look them up in the AWS provider documentation if you like, but it's not too important for now. Main thing is that we've got the bucket prefix. And there you can see it's come up with a name for us. And if I do AWS S3ls here, we have a bucket. And if I refresh this page, we have a bucket here too. That's the same bucket. This file that's appeared here, terraform.tfstate, is effectively Terraform's memory. It's the way it keeps track of the resources it's created for you. Don't edit it. Don't delete it. And in fact, in the next video, we'll talk about something called remote state, or using a remote state backend, which is a way of keeping that file in S3 generally, or any other storage system, which is useful for Terraform that multiple people are working on. Maybe if you've got your automated CI system running Terraform, it keeps everybody in sync. So I'll go into that next time, but for the time being, just don't remove it. It's just JSON. It's got a big list of all of the resources in there. You don't need to worry too much about it. Okay, we want to upload some files into S3 to store them. An empty bucket is not much use, doesn't cost anything, but it's just an empty bucket. We could go into the console and click upload and create our own files, but let's do it with Terraform because we're learning Terraform. So I'm going to write an object resource. I'm going to call it index. Maybe I want to upload an index file. And there are now 3 arguments that I need to give to this resource. The first one is bucket, to say which bucket we want to put the file in. I could copy the name and put it in here as the value of this attribute, this argument. But that would be annoying if I then maybe recreated the bucket. If I turned this into a module and reused it later on, this value would be wrong in that case. So what we'll do instead is reference the bucket object in Terraform. Now this is a fundamental thing about Terraform, and it's something you do all the time, is that by referring to other objects in the arguments to new objects, you are both making sure those values are right all the time, and you're also creating a dependency between one object and the other. That is, the object won't be created until the bucket is created. So that's a powerful concept in Terraform, this sort of referential behavior. The next argument we need to set is key, and in the case of S3, the key is effectively the path to the object. I'm just going to do index.html for now. And then I want to set some contents. There are 2 arguments that we could use here, and let's start with content, and I'm just going to type hello world. There you go. So to create an object, we've got these 3 arguments: the bucket, the key or location in the bucket, and the content. Now if I go over here, let's run, and we'll do a new command. We'll do Terraform plan, just to check that what we've written is going to do what we expect. As you can see, this is like Terraform apply, except that it doesn't then ask me straight away if I would like to apply it. So we've got AWS S3 object will be created in this bucket. See, no, I didn't type the bucket name out. It's found it itself. And the content is hello world, and the key is index.html. So let's apply. Check that that looks right. Say yes. Now if I go back to my bucket and refresh, we've got index.html, and it's 12 bytes, so we know that it's got the content that I set in Terraform. Now if this was maybe if it were an HTML file, I wouldn't want to have to go and type my HTML in this Terraform file. That would be a nightmare. So let's upload an existing file. So I'm going to put the same content in there, and then I'm going to replace this content argument with source equals index.html, and source is looking for a file name effectively. So now if I do apply, there you go, we can see a change. So it's saying that content, from Terraform's perspective, the content is being set to nothing, and the source is now the contents of this file, or it's uploading the file itself. So let's say yes. Modifications complete. And if I refresh this, you'll see this last modified has changed. There we go. So we've got the same content, just uploaded in a different way. Okay, let's say we've got more files. I will just create some files now. Let's make the files and put some files in it. So I've got page 1 to 10. Maybe I'm uploading my novel to S3. It's very interesting. This is page 6. I could copy this resource and go in and change it, and I could call this page 1, and it's the same bucket. I changed this to page, and so on. That would get very boring. Let's dry this out. Dry for don't repeat yourself. The key to doing the same thing over and over again with Terraform is the for each argument. So let's talk about that. I'm going to call this one pages. Every combination of resource type and resource name needs to be unique. So I couldn't have another object called index. I could have a bucket called index, but if I try to do AWS S3 object index twice, Terraform will give us an error explaining exactly what we've done wrong. So for each equals. Now for each is going to take a list of strings or a set of strings. And I could type this out. I could say page1.html. I could type them out and we'd be here for a long time. So what I'm going to do instead is use something called a function. And the function I'm going to use is file set. And the first argument to file set is the path. And the second argument, you can see it enumerates a set of regular file names. So we're saying look in the path files, and we'll give it the pattern. Let's just say star.html to make sure we don't pick up anything else. There aren't any other files in that directory, but just for completeness, let's do that. Now, we need to give the same arguments to this object as we did to the previous one. So we've got testbucket.id, and then for key, we're going to use the special object each.value. And what that will do is upload, so for page 1, if we sort of work through it, page 1, the key will be page1.html, and then the source will need to be files / and then I need to do string interpolation. So I'm doing files / $ curly brackets each.value. And what this means is every time you look at this, every time Terraform looks at this source, it's going to put each.value in this string. So in the case of page 1, it will do files / page1.html, and it will use that as the source argument to this instance of the resource. Okay, after all that, I've saved the file, so let's just do Terraform apply. There we go. You can see that it wants to add 10 things. Let's go through and check. Always scroll through and make sure that it's doing what you expect. You can see page 10 is directly after page 1 because it's sorting, and it's not sorting numerically, it's sorting alphabetically, I think is the term there. So page 1, 10, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's say yes. 10 resources added. Now if I go back to my bucket and refresh, we can see pages 1 through 10 have appeared in my bucket. Okay, so you can see how if you had some files that you wanted to upload to S3, you could use, 21 lines of Terraform to upload those files. Now there's just one more thing that I want to mention about managing files through Terraform, which is that it doesn't behave quite as you expect, and I'll explain why when you change a file. So if I were to go into one of these pages and say this is not page 7, if I run apply now, then Terraform is going to tell me that nothing has changed. And that's because it doesn't check the contents of all of the files every time you run Terraform, because that would imply that it downloads everything and compares it all, which would cost a lot in data transfer, it would take a lot of time. So we need to set something called an e tag on the file. And the best thing to set here is the hash of the file. I think it may be the only thing we can set. So we'll do files and then again each.value. And what this function is going to do, this file md5, is take an MD5 hash of the file contents and set that as a tag in S3. And what that means then is that S3 stores that tag, and then if we change the file, I'll demonstrate, if we change the file, that tag will change, and then Terraform knows to upload the new contents. So make sure you include that basically anytime you're uploading a file directly to Terraform, otherwise you may get quite confused at why Terraform doesn't want to change the files. Okay, so we've got some files in S3 and we've got some Terraform that does it. Let's just go ahead and clear things up now, and I'll do that by introducing the last Terraform command that we're going to use for now, which is Terraform destroy. Terraform destroy is equivalent to removing all of this code from your Terraform file. So you could do that. You could delete all of this and run Terraform apply, and it would say, oh, there's no resources that you're asking me to manage, so I'll delete the ones that I know about. Like I say in the state, that's Terraform's memory of the stuff that it's created for you. But we'll do it with Terraform destroy. So we say destroy. It's going to go through and say, you want to destroy the pages, the index, and the bucket. Say yes. 12 resources destroyed. And let's just go to S3 and check that. In fact, it's going to give me an error because the bucket no longer exists. Okay, and like I say, I'm just going to clean up that user now. So we'll go into user. I think I can just delete the whole thing. There we go. So that key I showed you earlier on isn't going to work either. All right, that was the basics of Terraform, creating resources, managing them, and then deleting them afterwards. Hope that was useful. Next time, I'm going to talk about remote state, why we use it, how to set it up, all that sort of thing. So I hope I'll see you again.